Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you all here with us for a very late night chat. It's 11:30, half hour to midnight here in New York, Brooklyn, New York, where I'm talking to you from my lovely Brooklyn apartment. As you can see, we got the beautiful bookshelf behind us. It's going to be awesome. Should be a great evening. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I guess we'll jump right into things. So yeah, let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Hey everybody, welcome. So the way we're doing things tonight, just like the way we do them every night, is that I will give my opening remarks at the same time that I'm giving my opening remarks. I'll be writing down your super chat questions. So if there's something you want me to talk about, by all means, just shoot me a super chat. I will take it down, and then we'll do the roll call when my opening remarks are done. And then after that, I will answer your super chat questions for the remaining half of the show. That's how we will do it. So that's how it works here. First, the opening remarks, then the roll call, then the answering of the super chat questions. So if you have something you want me to speak about, shoot me a super chat. I'll be typing them down as we go live. Good times, folks. Good times. Just started here streaming. Great conversations, good times. So I guess we can just kind of jump right into things. In my opening remarks tonight, I wanted to recall a very old television show that was on the air long before I was born. I've watched reruns of it, and I find it to be very, very entertaining. Of all the television that has been produced in the United States over the past several decades, this is a particularly good genre. This is a particularly good, it's not a genre, it's a good program that was produced. Eventually they made a movie of it during the 1970s, but the hit 1950s television show, they still run reruns of it on television. I think the Sci-Fi Channel around holiday times, they'll run marathons of it. It's called The Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone. And The Twilight Zone, it's not like any other TV show where, they have a set of characters that are on it every week or whatever. It wasn't like that at all. Every episode is a completely new thing, but it's these kind of science fiction stories that they did every week. The host of the show, Rod Sterling, he was the guy who wrote these science fiction stories. And the show The Twilight Zone, many people at the time particularly liked it because it was a liberal television program. It kind of expressed the essence of post-McCarthyism America. As McCarthyism was dying down, you had the rise of Cold War liberalism. You had the Kennedy administration. It set the stage for the Kennedy administration. You had Eisenhower, who was a Republican president, who was calming down, the Republicans. You eventually had the election of John F. Kennedy and the Cold War liberals. It was the end of McCarthyism, and anti-totalitarianism is a really big theme on The Twilight Zone. Most of the episodes, in some way or other, are intended to oppose totalitarianism. And it's liberal Cold War propaganda, right? Whereas the right wing is saying the commies are coming, the Reds are coming, and they're going to eat you alive, and you got to join the military and follow the Bible and be a conservative and don't question anything or you're working for the enemy, kind of like what we're hearing from the liberals today. That was the right wing. That was the McCarthyist. But this was Cold War liberalism. The idea was if we stay true to our American ideals, if we show that we're better than those darn Russians and them darn Chinese people, we start to have civil rights for African Americans, if we live true to our principles, we can defeat the Reds. That's kind of the message of the Twilight Zone. It's a much more liberal kind of message. It equates fascism and communism. It views all totalitarianism as the same. It's some of that synthetic left stuff I talked about, but it's a very clever, well-made TV program, The Twilight Zone. So there's one particular episode of The Twilight Zone I want to talk about, because this episode of The Twilight Zone, in a really ugly way, gets to the essence of the problem of what is believed in the United States by both the left and the right. Both conservatives and liberals, the right wing, the left wing, they all basically more or less believe the thesis of a famous episode of The Twilight Zone called To Serve Man. I don't know if you've ever seen the episode of The Twilight Zone called To Serve Man, but if you have, if you have, you know what I'm about to tell you. If you haven't, spoiler alert: To Serve Man. So the episode of The Twilight Zone goes like this, right? A bunch of space aliens have come down from outer space, but instead of being mean, scary invaders, these space aliens that have come down from outer space are decent people. They're nice guys. They're good folks. The space aliens that have come down from outer space are nice. They're decent people, and they start feeding people and caring for people, and they wipe out all diseases. They cure all the diseases that are affecting the human race. They cure all the diseases. And the space aliens come down and they give people new technology, and they solve the problem of world hunger. These space aliens are really nice. And frequently the people are asking them, why are you being so nice to us, space aliens? We thought space aliens would want to come and take us over. And the space aliens, every time that they're asked why they're doing a nice thing, they point to this book that they have. And the book is called To Serve Man. To Serve Man. It's called To Serve Man. So the space aliens are doing all these nice things and ending world hunger and bringing peace and doing all these good things. And so they decide to take some human beings back to their home planet. As a gesture of goodwill, they're going to take them back to the home planet. So they're loading a crew of people into their spaceship, getting ready to blast off to the home planet. But there's this one woman who's been translating their book, To Serve Man. She's been translating their book, To Serve Man, and she's been translating it. And as the spaceship is getting ready to blast off and these people are getting ready to go to the home planet, she's holding the book and she shouts, "It's a cookbook! It's a cookbook!" Ba-dum-bum. It's a cookbook. Get it? To serve man. It's not to serve man in terms of be nice to human beings. It's to serve man as a dish is served, as a delicacy is served. Human beings are the main course, and they're being so nice and feeding people to fatten them up so they can eat them when they get back to the home planet. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's the Twilight Zone. So it's a particularly dark episode. And it was apparently that story was based on a sci-fi story written by a science fiction novelist. He wrote it first as a short story. It was published. There used to be all these magazines back in the day, before there was the internet, before there was like fan fiction on the internet. There were magazines you could buy at stores where they would just have science fiction stories. Apparently it was written by a writer in the 1950s. He wrote To Serve Man as his science fiction story with this twist at the end. It's a cookbook. Now, at the time that this was released, the 1950s, McCarthyism, it's important to note that the Chinese Revolution had just occurred. The Chinese Communist Party had just taken power on the Chinese mainland. And what is the slogan of the Chinese Communist Party? Serve the people. Very similar to serve man. So it was probably an anti-communist analogy. More than anything, it was probably intended to mean that these commies, they offer people free healthcare and jobs. They say that they want peace in the world. They say they want to give everyone healthcare. But in the end of the day, they're just selfish, cruel people. And these communists, they want to devour you like evil cannibals. But the message of that story can go beyond that, right? I think that To Serve Man is probably considered to be generally an allusion to the Chinese Communist Party. That's probably clearly what it is meant to be. It's an allusion to the Chinese Communist Party and their role in the world, and the fact they said "serve the people" was their slogan. That was the official slogan of the party. However, I would say that the message of that story, more than anything, is don't trust anybody. Don't trust anybody. Nobody is nice. No one has good intention. Everyone is just trying to screw you over. So you should probably get ahead and try to screw them over before they get to screwing you over. Tim Pool drumming up Hong Kong protests in 20. Yeah. All right. We'll talk about that. Tim Pool drumming. And the message of the story is it's liberalism, but not liberalism in the sense of Democrats and Republicans. It's individualism, radical individualism. All collectivism is somehow dangerous, right? If someone comes along and is offering to give you health care, give you a guaranteed job, raise living standards, don't trust them, because no one really cares about anybody else. There is no real altruism in the world. And if you believe in such a thing, you're a sucker. You believe in such a thing, you are somehow being duped and manipulated. There is no truth. There is no morality. Everything is just a power struggle between the weak and the strong. This is the Nietzschean philosophy. This is the worldview of Friedrich Nietzsche. And it's, presented in a rather dumbed down and stupid way in the work of Ayn Rand, the right-wing free market libertarian. It's presented in a lot of different ways. And this is the philosophy that, that George Lukács refers to as irrationalism. But it is a very, very big factor in the United States. And To Serve Man really kind of expresses that. And there's another piece, that Donald Trump actually read on the campaign trail. Donald Trump from the podium of his campaign speeches in 2016. I remember watching live as Donald Trump read the lyrics to a jazz song. I guess in the 1970s there was a famous jazz musician. And he did like an experimental piece where he was playing music. He was playing music, and then he had someone recite this poem. And it's called "The Snake." The Snake, and I'll read you the lyrics here. I talk about it in my book on Kamala Harris. I talk about it because it's a very similar piece. It has this anti-human perspective, this irrationalist contempt for humanity. If I can just find a place where the lyrics are available. I believe it's in the public domain, but there you go. If I can just find the lyrics, The Snake here. All right, I want to read it to you because it's short, but Trump meant it as an anti-immigrant analogy. He meant it to be like a warning against immigrants. But if you read it, it's more than just a warning. It's more than just that. In fact, the author of the piece actually asked Trump to stop reading. It was Al Wilson is the author of this piece, this poem. And he actually asked Trump, I believe it was his estate, asked Donald Trump to stop playing the piece because it was considered, he didn't mean it that way. Apparently, he meant it to be an analogy for domestic violence. But Donald Trump used it as an anti-immigrant piece. And again, it's the same kind of worldview as To Serve Man. The lyrics go like this. On her way to work one morning, down the path alongside the lake, a tender-hearted woman saw a poor half-frozen snake. His pretty colored skin had been all frosted with the dew. Oh, well, she cried, I'll take you in, and I'll take care of you. Take me in, oh tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, tender woman, sighed the snake. Now she wrapped him up all cozy in a coverture of silk and laid him by the fireside with some honey and some milk. Now she hurried home from work that night, and as soon as she arrived, now she found the pretty snake she'd taken in had been revived. Take me in, oh tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sakes. Take me in, tender woman, sighed the snake. Now she clutched him in her bosom. "You're so beautiful," she cried. "But if I hadn't brought you in, by now you might have died." Now she stroked his pretty skin again and kissed him and held him tight. But instead of saying thanks, the snake gave her a vicious bite. "Take me in, tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, tender woman," sighed the snake. "I saved you," cried the woman, "and you've bitten me. Even why? And you know your bite is poisonous, and that now I'm going to die." "Oh, shut up, silly woman," said the reptile with a grin. "You knew darn well I was a snake before you took me in." Now, Donald Trump read that at his rally. Market relations. All right. Donald Trump read that at his rally in order to push this idea that these immigrants that we're taking in, we're trying to be kind and compassionate, but these immigrants that we're taking in, some of them might be drug dealers and terrorists and, murder us. And so we shouldn't let our compassion make us into suckers or whatever. That was what Donald Trump was trying to say. Not a good message, right? Because we know that the USA does bring terrorists into the United States, but they know it's not that they're being kind and compassionate. They know exactly what they're doing, right? All over the world, the United States supports terrorists to tear down socialist governments. In Afghanistan, the United States supported, Al Qaeda in fighting against the Soviet Union. And the New Jersey bomber, Ahmed Rahami, his father is somebody who fought in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. The Chechen brothers, the Tsarnaev brothers, who bombed the concert or who bombed the marathon in Boston, vicious murderers. They were Chechens, right? Their parents were terrorists who the U.S. government had employed in Chechnya to fight against the Soviet Union. And that, Miami is full of anti-Cuba terrorists. Luis Posada Carriles, who bombed an airline in Cuba and killed like 72 people in this airline bombing. He was, coddled by the United States, kept here because he was considered an ally of the United States against socialism in Cuba. The USA isn't bringing terrorists in because it feels sorry for people and has empathy. The USA is bringing terrorists in on purpose because it uses and cultivates these extremists. And January 6th, the big rally that Donald Trump had, the storming of the Capitol, et cetera, that was a lot of these terrorist groups that the USA has supported. It was the Shahs of Sunset Park, the Persian exiles who were in with the brutal Pahlavi monarchy of Iran. You had, the Emi Mujahideen Khalq from Iran. You had extremist Netanyahu supporters and far-right Zionists in Israel, from Israel, big Israeli flags all through the crowd. You had the Falun Gong religious cult, a fanatical cult that wants to bring down the Chinese government. And that, all over the world, whether it's, Afghanistan or Syria or Libya, in Libya, the United States backed and supported a bunch of terrorists to fight against Gaddafi. One of them was the guy who, I believe it was Salman Abedi, who bombed the concert in Manchester, right? This was somebody who'd been armed by the British government and backed by the American and British government to fight against a socialist government in Libya. The USA and the British brought him back to Britain, and he went around and he turned around and he bombed Libya. And it wasn't because they were having compassion. It was because they wanted to destroy socialism. And so, yes, the USA does go around the world arming terrorists. Yes, the USA does reward terrorists who do their bidding around the world with visas. But it's not about compassion. And the people fleeing on the border, coming in on the Mexican border that are fleeing drug gangs in Guatemala or instability and lack of development in Honduras, a lot of them don't speak Spanish. They speak only indigenous languages. Those people are not terrorists the USA is taking in, and they're not the people that commit the terrorist attacks. The terrorist attacks tend to be committed by the terrorists the USA arms around the world. Do you anticipate plenty of Ukraine Nazi refugees come to the USA? Well, there's already a number coming in. Joe Biden has created a number, and we'll talk about that. Refugees in USA. They've already got a program set up, so we can talk about all of that. But there you go. So Donald Trump's poem that he was using to promote anti-immigrant bigotry, it was missing the mark. It wasn't a very good analysis of what's actually going on, number one. But number two, it was appealing to this idea that the whole world is against you, that anyone who comes to you pushing the idea that we can work together for the good of humanity, that we can share common goals, anyone who does that is just trying to scam you. You should never have compassion for anyone else. You should never have kindness in your heart. You should never seek human solidarity. Instead, you should just be a purely selfish person, manipulating people, working in your own self-interest, and struggling against other people. Victory goes to the strong, might makes right, etc. Now, that's a very, very sinister message, but it's really what our rulers believe. That is the ruling ideology of the era that we live in. That is what the ruling class believes. The neoconservatives, that's what they believe. And the bread tube Jacobin synthetic left crowd, that's what they believe. And libertarians believe that, and they emphasize the economic aspect of it. And bread tubers believe that. I mean, ContraPoints made this video on envy that you can see. And it's just about the concept of envy. And in the middle of it, she goes and she starts talking about Christianity and Christian values. And out of the blue, she just goes on this whole Nietzschean analysis of Christianity. And instead of giving the scientific Marxist understanding of where Christianity came from, that comes from Karl Kautsky, the understanding that Christianity was the vehicle through which the Roman proletariat expressed itself as a new class, struggling, neither slaves nor masters, struggling for its rights, etc. Instead of understanding Christianity as an expression of the Roman proletariat that eventually got co-opted by the empire to serve their own ends as the empire was falling apart, instead of doing that, she argues that Christianity is the slave morality, the slave religion. That might makes right, and it's just to give consolation to weak people. ContraPoints goes on this whole rant where she's basically arguing that Nietzsche's analysis of Christianity, which is the same, I mean, it's basically the snake or to serve man. She basically starts arguing for that. That's how our leaders believe. They are very sinister people. Stacey Abrams believes, that she said that Atlas Shrugged is the book that most inspired her. She's supposed to be a liberal. She's supposed to be a Democrat, for goodness sakes. But the sinister, libertarian, right-wing ideas, the John Galt stuff, is what inspires Stacey Abrams. And of course, it inspires Rand Paul, the conservative. Rand Paul is supposedly, rumors are that he's named after that. He's named after Rand, right? That's not proven, but many people believe that to be the case. In addition to that, we understand that Paul Ryan, the conservative from, I think, Minneapolis, Minnesota, he also apparently, Ayn Rand is his great inspiration, right? And that Leo Strauss, the founder of neoconservative thought, the philosophy professor who started out at the New School in New York and eventually moved to the University of Chicago. He was a refugee from Nazi Germany, and he became kind of a mentor to the neoconservatives. And he had this weird interpretation of Nazi Germany, where Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union are the same, and it's all just the average people getting together, and we got to protect the freedom of the intellectuals, and the political evil, they call it, is when you mobilize the people to fight for their own interests. Paul Ryan's in Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin. There you go. Thank you. Class analysis. Thank you very much. This is the ruling ideology of the epoch we are living in. We are living in an era where the ruling elite basically believes that humanity is in a struggle against itself. That might makes right, that collectivism is always a scam, that collectivism is always just a crude manipulation. There is no real right and wrong. There's only strength and weakness. That's what they believe, right? And and they are espousing this ideology very blatantly. And as a result of this, our society is coming apart, right? We don't have paved roads even, right? That's a collective idea. The idea that we should have paved roads that benefit everyone who might drive on them. Well, that's a collectivist notion, right? The notion that we ought to have, decent schools for our kids to go to. Again, schools that anyone can go to. It's not just for you. I mean, we are eroding all forms of collectivism in the United States. And as a result, even among the ruling class, they don't have collective vision. Before the Second World War, there was a lot of division in the United States. The Roosevelt camp was favoring an alliance with the Soviet Union against fascism. And the National Association of Manufacturers and the conservatives were favoring an alliance with Nazi Germany because they didn't like the labor movement. They wanted to crush the labor movement. They thought fascism was a way to crush the labor movement. And there were divisions. But after the war got going, Henry Ford and Walt Disney and all these billionaire capitalists who'd supported Hitler, they changed their tune. And they said, look, I mean, we're in this together. It's America. America has decided Hitler's the enemy. And they more or less started, cooperating with the war effort. Now we know IBM was involved in the Holocaust and was dealing with the punch card machines and stuff. So it's not completely true, but not completely true they all cooperated, but there was a national understanding. And we don't see that nowadays. There's a huge amount of division among the powers that be because they have rejected any notion of collectivism. They are at the point where they themselves are not loyal even to their own class, even to their own market ideals and capitalism. They are just fighting amongst themselves. And capitalism is becoming more and more unsustainable due to the problem of overproduction, due to the computer revolution, due to the fact that under capitalism, your only value is as a worker, right? You sell yourself to your boss. You rent yourself out to your boss. And under capitalism, you rent yourself out to your boss, and your boss only hires you if he can make a profit from your labor. And if the boss determines that he's not making a profit from your labor, then you don't have a job. And under capitalism, the more efficient it becomes to produce goods, the better technology enables capitalists to churn out products. The fewer workers that are involved, the fewer people that are hired, and the fewer people that are paid. And so the capitalist pays less and less to produce more and more and more. And pretty soon you have all kinds of people on the outside who have been abandoned by the capitalist system. They have less and less of a place for productive labor in the economy. Under capitalism, technology is generally phasing out what you call productive labor, people that are involved in creating real value and creating products. And so productive labor or industrial labor, labor at the assembly line, labor, point of production labor is constantly being reduced at the same time that the wages that are being paid out with every product that is being produced are also going down. And so the ability of the worker to buy the product also decreases. You talk about the tendency of the falling rate of profit, which is a very big part of the Marxist understanding of the problem with capitalism. That under capitalism, wealth creates poverty. That the more wealth that is created, the poorer people get. The more efficient it becomes to create products, the poorer people get. People become homeless because there is too much housing. People become hungry because there is too much food. This is the irrationality of the capitalist system. It is production organized for profit, and it is a highly irrational system. And so we would argue the ultimate response is eventually all the people who've been cast out coming together and forming combinations and seizing control of the means of production, and the banks, factories, and industries being seized by the people, and the economy being reorganized to not be operating for profit, so that the economy can be rationally organized to serve public good and not the profits of a few. And this problem of overproduction is eliminated. And with a rationally planned economy, you can plan out long-term sustainable growth in the interests of all society. And growth is no longer held back by the irrationality. We can overcome things like fossil fuels. We can get to fusion energy. We can eliminate scarcity. And with the elimination of scarcity, inequality also fades away. And we can eventually have a society where people live based on, what is they want to do. Labor becomes life's prime want, no longer necessary as a means. People don't work because they have to. They work because they feel like it. They work to stop becoming bored. And with vast material abundance, inequality can fade away and coercion can fade away and the state itself can fade away. And this is the ultimate vision of Marxism. But we're living in the dead end of capitalism. Capitalism is in a state of complete and utter decay. It's not functioning anymore. It's falling apart. Capitalism is in a state of complete and utter decay. The capitalists don't know what to do in order to solve the problem, and they're scrambling and fighting among each other, trying to stabilize a naturally unstable system. And they have competing visions for how to stabilize it. And that fascism, historically, is a mechanism for trying to stabilize capitalism during a crisis of overproduction. During a sustained long-term economic crisis, the capitalists battle amongst each other. One faction seizes power, another faction seizes power. They try to take control of the economy, and they try to stabilize the economy at the expense of the other capitalists. And this is called Bonapartism. And the synthetic left, what they put out at this point is very much, it is one one Bonapartist or fascist proposal. It's not the only one. There are many different Bonapartist and fascist models being floated right now. But basically, if you listen to BreadTube, you listen to the synthetic left, what they want is they basically want to create a society where the huge multinational corporations like Amazon, like Walmart, like Google and Facebook, where these corporations are somehow cooperatives. And the Nazis did this too, and so did the Italian fascists, right? Corporate statism. The idea is they'll, on paper, you'll get a piece of paper if you work at these companies that says you're a partial owner. Bill Gates is still going to own Microsoft. Jeff Bezos is still going to own Amazon. It's not really socialization, but suddenly you're going to be told you're a co-owner of the company as well. It's corporate statism. Look at what Mussolini put forward in Italy, right? Is the idea is going to form a corporate model, a corporation where there's the capitalist and the worker and the government manager, and together they're all cooperating for the good of everybody, except it's not for the good of everybody. It's still for the private ownership of the capitalist who's trying to make a profit. But you as a worker, maybe some of your pay is a share of the profits. You get incentive pay rather than a wage, right? It's not like if you work a 40-hour week, you get this much. Oh, no. If the company's stock goes down, your pay goes down. If the company's stock goes up, your pay goes up. And according to these people who think worker cooperatives are socialism, that's great. You're a partial owner. Well, no, you're not, because you don't, you're not producing for your own good. It is still, even though your pay and your incentive pay or whatever is based on how the company does, it's still owned by the big capitalists. So on paper, you get this thing that says that you're a co-owner, and it's driving you to work harder, essentially. Meanwhile, the lower level corporations are all crushed, right? They're all crushed, the lower level corporations. The government merges with these high level corporations. We get a slip of paper that says we're technically owners of these corporations, which we're not. And then on top of that, the government is constantly working with the corporations to reduce living standards, to degrow, right? We're told that there's overconsumption going on, right? And so, they start saying, you know what, everyone's got to live on half as much. It's for the environment, guys, right? And they start, they double the price of gasoline. They make it very hard for you to get a car because, the environment, it's bad. They reduce the, they reduce the amount of wealth that average people have. They drive down consumption, and they start driving down the birth rate, telling people not to have children, morally stigmatizing having children. They start morally stigmatizing anybody who would want to grow or expand. And they start at the same time, carefully, quietly killing off people they deem to be useless eaters. The Nazis first started rounding up the disabled people and killing the disabled people, and we know how the Holocaust, progressed. And this is fascism. And this is the fascist model being put forward by the Joe Biden wing of U.S. imperialism. And there's not full unity around it. I think this is the Silicon Valley fascist model. This is the technocracy model, right? And the idea is to roll back freedom of speech, because if you say something wrong, you're somehow oppressing other people. The idea is to degrow and reduce the population in the name of environmentalism. The idea is to maximize the role of huge multinational corporations and secure their monopoly and call it socialism, right? By giving everyone a piece of paper that says they're a co-owner somehow, right? That is kind of the model that they want. And it sounds actually very similar to what Benito Mussolini did in Italy. Nazi Germany is a little bit of a different story, but it's actually somewhat similar to the Benito Mussolini fascist model, right? This is technocracy. That's what they're pushing, and it is very sinister. And the main reason that it's not socialism is that it doesn't resolve the problem of profits in command. It's a heavily controlled capitalism where the state and the corporations merge into one. And it's a highly controlled society where there's definitely an authoritarian state that is controlling people and forcing the population to decline. But you still, at the same time, this model still doesn't eradicate the profit motive. Profit is still directing production, so it can't solve the problem. And that's why fascist Italy and Nazi Germany ultimately went into World War II, is that they're Bonapartist maneuvering to control capitalism with a heavy state force, right? And protect the monopolies and control and mobilize the workers, etc., didn't really work at the end of the day. They had to have World War II because after a while, the profit motive still eliminates workers from the assembly line. You still have the problems of overproduction. And it just, at the end of the day, you're still going to have the same problems. But when we talk about the low-wage police state, the low-wage police state looks differently for different factions of the ruling class. I think there's sections of the Trump ruling class, ICE, the ICE detention facilities, some of which were private and for profit. Though ICE folks have a very different model of a low-wage police state. Their low-wage police state would be mass incarceration of people of color, empowering, the policing agencies. It would be more classical fascism, empowering the military, etc. And it's their kind of attempt to save capitalism, but it's still a Bonapartist maneuver. It's still about degrowing and driving down population. It's about driving down different sections of the population. They're aiming at black and brown people. They're aiming at immigrants. They're aiming at Muslims. Whereas it seems like the more liberal technocratic folks, they're aiming at the rural folks. They're aiming at empowering the big monopolies, like a highly controlled corporate state. Thank you, David, for the super chat. But this is ultimately, this is the technocratic vision that's emerging. This is Jeff Bezos fascism. This is the low-wage police state model that is being put forward. And that's why when, I wrote Bread Tube Serves Imperialism, because I want to expose these people. I want to expose that socialism is about overcoming the problem of profits in command. Socialism is about growth and unleashing growth and getting rid of the artificial restraints on human productivity. That's what it's ultimately about. Socialism is the opposite of degrowth. But the fact that this book has been published, now there's a new book that's being pushed everywhere. It's called A Future Beyond Capitalism, Degrowth. And it's making people believe that socialism is all about degrowth. And that's bullshit. And as people get poorer, let me add, as people get poorer, which they already are, the gas prices, the food prices, since the pandemic, living standards among the working class are dropping. Degrowth is going to become less and less popular. I'm just telling you, when people have less than they used to have, going to them and saying, you ought to have less than you already have, not going to be a popular message. And I mean, that's a fact. You can moralize it all you want, but as people's, living conditions are getting worse, the message of you should have less is going to become less and less popular. It's going to become less and less popular. And so, they're trying to cultivate a layer of these kind of middle-class people who are the morality police, whose job it is to go around explaining to everyone why they should want less and be happy about it. That's basically what's going on. And so we're seeing some interesting developments. Now, I'm not sure where all of this is going to lead, right? We're seeing, a lot of different developments here. But the main thing that I wanted to comment on, and this is where I wanted to show, right? We have to destroy the idea that fascism can only be a right-wing phenomenon. Talk about that. Right. Destroy the idea that I want to show you this video because I don't agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene. What she says about immigrants is despicable and horrific to me. What she says about about Muslims, awful. She supports Israel, big supporter of Israel, calls the Palestinians terrorists, awful. She thinks everybody that she disagrees with is a communist. Communism's the enemy. She loves capitalism. So I went to Marjorie Taylor Greene's page last night. I was talking on the phone to a friend of mine. And he said, check out what Marjorie Taylor Greene's been saying. So I went to her page and I saw there's a speech Marjorie Taylor Greene gave, a 2-minute speech on the floor of Congress. And I thought, okay, I'm going to watch this, and I'm she might say a few good things, but like always with Marjorie Taylor Greene, there's something bad mixed into it because she's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's a right winger. She's an anti-immigrant bigot. She's a Trump supporter. She's, QAnon or whatever. So there's got to be something bad, she said. I watched this speech. I couldn't find anything I disagreed with. There's only one thing, and I'm not even sure. It depends how she meant it. I think she meant it in a negative way, but you can interpret however you want. I couldn't find anything in this speech that I really disagreed with. There was like one passing remark, but even that, it's not completely wrong. I couldn't find anything I disagreed with in this speech. Watch it. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene, the QAnon, evil, right-wing, demagogue. We're all supposed to hate her. This is the incarnation of evil. This is, if you're a good MSNBC viewer, you're a good CNN viewer, this is the woman. This is who you're supposed to hate. This is what you're supposed to hate. Watch this.
Thank you. I rise in opposition to the Ukrainian supplemental bill, $40 billion, but there's no baby formula for American mothers and babies. An unknown amount of money to the CIA in the Ukraine supplemental bill, but there's no formula for American babies and mothers. $54 million in COVID spending in Ukraine, but there's no formula for American babies and mothers. $900 million for nonprofits and organizations in Ukraine, but there's no formula for American babies and mothers. $8.7 billion for economic support and funding in Ukraine, but there's no formula for American mothers and babies. If this is about claiming that it's about saving lives, let's be real, then we would care about war-torn countries like Ethiopia. So that's a bunch of hypocrisy because I never hear Ethiopia brought up here. Totally ignoring, completely ignoring our own border crisis, our own baby formula crisis, and brutal inflation, skyrocketing gas prices that no one can afford, but $40 billion for Ukraine? Stop funding regime change and money laundering scams and U.S. politician cover-ups of their crimes in countries like Ukraine. The American people do not support paying for constant U.S. involvement in foreign affairs while our own government fails our own country. Let me remind everyone here, we swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and our borders. We should be paying attention to our country right now. I yield back. Thank you.
I mean, where was she wrong? I mean, yeah, she's an awful person. She's anti-immigrant. She's a right-wing gun nut. She's a, anti-communist. But I mean, the only thing I would disagree with, and again, as she referenced the borders twice in the speech, and for her, that means build a wall. That means empower ICE. That means detention facilities separating children. So, for her, referencing the border there means something bad. So I would disagree with that. But first of all, there is a crisis on the border. There is. I mean, and there are a lot of people coming in. And we think the answer is economic development. We don't support attacks on immigrant communities. But there is a crisis. So she's not lying when she says there's a crisis. There is definitely a crisis. So, but even still, yes, we know for her that means immigrant repression. But other than that, there was not a single thing in that speech that was wrong. This sounds like the International Action Center. Right? This sounds like, I was in the Workers' World Party for years. I used to work with Ramsey Clark. Our mantra was money for jobs, not for war. Money for jobs, not for war. Money for jobs, not for war. You know what I mean? Money for schools, not for war. Books, not bomb. I mean, we beat that drum all the time. Right? Why are we spending money on bombing people overseas when there's hungry Americans? Don't cut food stamps, feed the people, not the Pentagon. I was part of a feed the people, not the Pentagon brigade at one point. In the summer before Occupy Wall Street started, we had 3 or 4, there was 14 of us. We marched. We were the feed the people, not the Pentagon brigade. This is basic leftist, populist, anti-imperialist messaging, right? Is that our government doesn't care about us. It cares about the huge multinational corporations that are trying to dominate the planet. And that it is in the interest of the working people of the United States to align with countries like Russia and China and Venezuela and Cuba and Iran that are struggling against the imperialists, right? I mean, this is basic leftism. Now we're hearing it from her. Meanwhile, all these socialists in Congress are saying the opposite. They're screaming about Putin, Putin, Putin. Oh my God, Putin. We need to censor the media because somebody might be sympathetic to Putin. And I mean, this is a big mess, folks. It's a big, big mess. And I mean, I don't like Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I like that speech. I mean, that speech sounds like a speech I could have heard at an International Action Center Workers' World Party rally years ago. I could have heard that speech, from Fred Goldstein or Larry Holmes. I mean, that sounds exactly like what Ramsey Clark would say, and right. I mean, and also let me add, right, if she's a libertarian, she shouldn't want the government spending money on baby food, right? Right? The mom should work hard and get money and buy her own baby food. Why should the government be providing baby food? You know what I mean? If you don't have, so it's not very libertarian of her to be saying that, we should spend money on baby food. Libertarians generally don't want to spend money overseas either, but if she's a true Ayn Rand libertarian, she should, giving, food to hungry children is a violation of the property rights of taxpayers or something. She's not saying that. She's just saying, look, how do we benefit by giving money to this corrupt regime in Ukraine? We're pouring billions of dollars into this regime. And meanwhile, there's already starting to be a baby food crisis in the United States, and the big food crisis is on the horizon. And maybe we ought to be worried about feeding people rather than killing people. It's very basic. This is the basic populist, socialist, anti-imperialist message. This is what the left, listen to George Galloway and what he said on the floor of Parliament in the UK. Listen to Michael Moore, for Christ's sakes. Go watch Fahrenheit 9/11, go watch Capitalism, a Love Story with Michael Moore, where he interviews Tony Benn, the British socialist leader. He says, if you can find money to kill people, why, you can find money to help people. It's just, it's just utterly horrendous, keep in mind that, this woman here, I'll put her on the screen. I'm not going to play the video again. I'm just going to put her on the screen. She's supposed to be public enemy number one, right? We're supposed to hate her, right? She is supposed to, just showing this image is supposed to cause like trauma and triggering among millions of oppressed people. Like, she is Satan incarnate, and she's talking this way. And that's a little interesting, isn't it? She's Satan. She's Satan incarnate, right? She's evil. She is all, and she's saying this. Meanwhile, the people that are supposedly socialists are saying that, are saying that you have to support, NATO, and that anyone who says anything different is a Putin propagandist, and we have to silence and censor the internet and shut down all dissident voices. And, I'm just telling you, we are living in very, very strange times. And I'm not quite sure what the answer is, and we'll get into some of that in the Q&A. There's a lot to it, but I want to talk to you about Abraham Lincoln. I want to talk to you about Abraham Lincoln because, Abraham Lincoln, the single-minded son of the working class, Abraham Lincoln was not perfect. Abraham Lincoln was a racist in a lot of ways. When he was first running for the U.S. Senate, you read the Lincoln-Douglas debates, he said some pretty awful racist things. But if you read W.E.B. Du Bois and Black Reconstruction, Lincoln changed as a result of the coalition that was necessary to defeat the slaveholders. That Lincoln took office. He took the position that he was personally opposed to slavery, but he didn't want to abolish slavery. And he took office saying that that he did believe Black people were an inferior race, but he just didn't want slavery to expand. Why open borders? I didn't say open borders, but we'll talk about that. We will talk about that. I do not believe in open borders, Bob. I don't. And I've clarified that before, and we'll talk about that. Open borders. Why? I'll tell you, I'm not for open borders, and I oppose people who propose open borders. I'll be real about that. But anyway, but Abraham Lincoln took office. He was advocating. He was saying that Black people were an inferior race. He said he didn't want to abolish slavery, but he was morally opposed to it. He didn't want it to expand. But then he took office, and he was just restricting the slaveholders. He was saying, we're not going to have any new slave states enter the United States, right? The states that are already in the United States that have slavery, whatever, but new states that come in, Kansas, they're not going to be slave states. And then Abraham Lincoln also said, and we're not going to make states around the country cooperate with you. They passed the Fugitive Slave Law, it was called. It said that, if a slave broke free and ran away to a state that didn't have slavery, then that state was required to cooperate with bringing that slave back. And Abraham Lincoln said, we ain't going to enforce that. If a slave gets free and runs to Ohio or Michigan or whatever, that's, Michigan's got no obligation to return this slave back to the slave state. And that was too much for the slaveholders. They were furious. They saw that basically industrial capitalism was more efficient than slavery, and that their wing of the economy was decreasing. And so the slaveholders, with the backing of the British, took up arms against the American government. And if you read the letters, they always say this, that the Civil War was about states' rights, but it wasn't, right? If you read the letters that the Confederate states wrote about why they were resigning, It wasn't their right to have slaves. It was like, how dare the federal government not accommodate us? How dare the federal government not bend over backwards to help us have slaves? How dare they not bring in new slave states? How dare they not, have the fugitive slave law and bring slaves back when they run away? And so, the Confederacy was demanding that the federal government accommodate slavery. And Abraham Lincoln took power on a platform of, we will not accommodate slavery. That was it. It wasn't even a radical program. It was a pretty moderate proposal. He didn't even want to get rid of slavery. He came into office saying, you know what? No more cooperating with slavery. You want to do your slave thing in the South? Fine, but we ain't helping you. You're on your own, buddy. No more slave states, no more. And that was all it took. And the slaveholders were so threatened by that because they knew that industrial capitalism was much more efficient. And they knew that if they didn't have the federal government bending over backwards to protect them, that slavery was going to fade away. And they knew that slavery somehow being abolished meant they would lose millions of dollars of property. That's chattel slavery, right? Where humans are reduced to being property, and that they would lose that property. And so the slave owners took up arms against the federal government, and the slave states separated. And you had the Civil War. And at the beginning of the Civil War, the Union Army was losing at the beginning of the Civil War, right? The federal government of the United States, the military was very weak. And the South, they had stronger armies. And so Abraham Lincoln was basically forced to reconfigure the way the U.S. military works, reconfigure the U.S. government, and to make a populist appeal to mobilize to defeat the slaveholders. And so Abraham Lincoln built a coalition. The labor unions were opposed to slavery. Why? Because even if these labor unions were racist, right? If you're competing with people who work for free, your wages are going to be very, very low. And in the South, labor unions, had no power because they were competing with people who worked for free, right? And they took up the slogan. They say, labor in white skin cannot be free when labor in black skin is branded, right? That was how they put it. And in addition to that, you had the abolitionist movement and John Brown and a lot of religious people who were morally opposed to slavery. And they, in their heart and their soul, they believed slavery was wrong. They were very religious. You had, Mormons and Seventh-day Adventists and all kinds of religious people. You had John Brown, the great abolitionist hero, who, was hanged after his uprising at Harper's Ferry. But you had millions of people around the country who thought he was a hero. And you had Frederick Douglass. You had Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, and you had this huge coalition that was formed. And over the course of the war, Abraham Lincoln's politics changed. Abraham Lincoln said that he didn't want to end slavery. Abraham Lincoln ended up passing a constitutional amendment to end slavery. Abraham Lincoln passed the Emancipation Proclamation. And W.E.B. Du Bois argues that over the course of the war, Abraham Lincoln became friends with Frederick Douglass. And Abraham Lincoln, in addition to that, he made Harriet Tubman a leader of the U.S. military. Harriet Tubman became the first woman ever to lead U.S. soldiers into battle as she was leading an army of freed slaves up and down the Combahee River in South Carolina, raiding plantations and liberating slaves. And over the course of the war, Abraham Lincoln became a revolutionary. And that this is how real politics happen. Real politics happen because there is a real contradiction that is inescapable in society. And slavery was a real contradiction that was inescapable in society. There were two camps that could not reconcile. And over the course of this contradiction, forces maneuver, coalitions are formed, and Abraham Lincoln may not have wanted to be a revolutionary, but he was, right? I believe it was the great poet Walt Whitman. He wrote, "Old Abe Lincoln came up from the wilderness," he came up from the wilderness, he said, "Old Jeff Davis tore down the government. So old Abe Lincoln built us up a better one." And the U.S. Civil War was the second American Revolution. Now, it was betrayed. It was absolutely betrayed by Reconstruction, right? That Reconstruction, after the war, they were redistributing land. That's where the phrase 40 acres and a mule comes from. And after the war, there were huge efforts to try and make society more just and fair. But then, you had the rolling back of Reconstruction and the rise of Jim Crow. It was a betrayal. But the struggle to defeat slavery was a monumentous struggle in which hundreds of thousands of people died, in which many revolutionaries like Karl Marx, like August Willich and Joseph Wedemeyer played a tremendous role. It was a real struggle. And Lincoln reluctantly found himself in the leadership of this revolution, right? And this is what needs to be understood. This is what needs to be understood is that, and thank you, Silky Patio, for the super chat. I do appreciate it. You're on, Silky Patio is on Rockfin, and I'm streaming on Rockfin right now. So there you go. I don't know what that means. Don't know what that means, but good luck. This is how real change happens. There's a science of revolution, and that revolutions don't drop down from the sky, and they're not willed by people's good intentions or morality. They come about as the result of real, inescapable material contradictions in society, and they involve building mass coalitions, and they involve contradictions, right? I have seen Free State of Jones. It's a great movie. I mean, it's a little bit, some of the violence is a little bit hard to get through, but some of the scenes in it are beautiful, where they tear down the Confederate flag and put up the American flag. They proclaim the proclamation of the Free State of Jones, that no man has to fight for a cause he doesn't believe in, that no man can get rich by making another man poor, and that all who walk on 2 feet should be treated as human beings. Beautiful movie about an anti-slavery uprising in the South between low-income white workers and slaves who revolted against the Confederacy. It's a great movie. But this is real scientific Marxism, what I'm talking here. This is real scientific Marxism. And you have to dig into this stuff. And it's not simple. And it's not something you can solve with a slogan. And it's not moralism. And the problem is that we are entering a period where the proletarian revolution is already, it's already in effect in many countries in the world. China has had a socialist revolution, Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua. The proletarian revolution is already happening around the world, but in the Western strongholds of imperialism, it's not. And we are entering a period where the labor aristocracy is being demolished. We're entering a period of huge technological leaps, which under capitalism result in long-term economic crises. We're entering a period of Bonapartism and fighting in the ruling class. And if we're serious about politics, we could be entering a period where we could be seeing a socialist revolution, right? We could be living in the era. Not could be. We are living in the era where American imperialism will be brought down. We are living in the last days. The last days, folks. We are living in the last days of American imperialism. However, what will replace American imperialism? Will we go to a higher plane? Will the proletariat of the United States take power? And will we have a rationally planned socialist economy where the means of production are organized to serve public good and not profits? And we start teaming up with Russia and China and building and growing, and living standards are rising, and poverty is being eradicated, and new breakthroughs in technology are leading to a society that's more and more abundant and more egalitarian? Or will we deteriorate and depopulate, and will we get something worse than what we have now, right? At least now, the electricity comes on. At least now there's not like 2 armed gangs fighting for control of your city, right? It's very possible that the collapse of American imperialism, if it doesn't lead to a higher plane, could lead to, the collapse of a civilization. And that is something that we should stand against. And in order to make clear that we don't want the collapse of a civilization, we have to be patriots. We have to be patriots, and we have to be putting forward policy solutions that will actually make the country better. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you very much. I'm glad you hang on my words. I'm doing the best I can. We have to put forward policy solutions that will make life better. We have to be at the center of a coalition that will actually improve things. And we have to figure out how we can make an anti-monopoly coalition. The enemy of humanity at this time is the imperialists, imperialism. And no, that doesn't mean armies. And no, that doesn't mean people who want to colonize people. Imperialism is an economic system. And the imperialists are the ultra monopoly capitalists, the big huge corporations and banks and trusts and cartels and syndicates that have their tentacles stretched out across the planet. The imperialists, Walmart, Amazon, Rockefeller, right? Fidel, right? That's true. And those are the imperialists. Those are the enemies of all humanity. And William Z. Foster, the great American Marxist, taught us that the goal of Marxists and communists in the United States is to build the anti-monopoly coalition, the coalition against the imperialists. And that coalition will include small farmers, and it will include small business owners, and may even include lower level capitalists. But the main force, the center of the anti-monopoly coalition, is going to be the working class, the workers. The workers will sit at the center of the anti-monopoly coalition. And the anti-monopoly coalition will be aligned with anti-imperialist forces around the world. Read The Twilight of World Capitalism by William Z. Foster, the greatest American Marxist, the guy who inspired the great Union victory for Chris Smalls of Amazon. Right now, they've had some setbacks, but Chris Smalls, the leader of the Amazon Union drive, Chris Smalls is inspired by William Z. Foster. And William Z. Foster, one of his last books, I believe it is his last book, is called The Twilight of World Capitalism. And towards the end of it, he puts forward the anti-monopoly state, the notion of the anti-monopoly coalition. And the anti-monopoly state, or the anti-monopoly coalition, is when all the forces that are opposed to the imperialists in this country come together. They come together and they put a government into office that represents their fight and sides with them against the monopolies. And that out of necessity, William Z. Foster says, that the anti-monopoly coalition, will have to change the military, and it will have to change the way the economy works. And in order to stay in power, an anti-monopoly state will be forced to move towards socialism. It'll have to change the nature of the state. It'll have to change the nature of the economy, and that to prevent being overthrown, an anti-monopoly state is going to have to emerge and defend itself by moving towards socialism. And we need to be focused on building the anti-monopoly coalition. That is our job. If we're serious about socialism, our job is to build the anti-monopoly coalition. These lower level capitalists who are supporting people like Marjorie Taylor Greene have got to realize that they can make a lot more money by trading with Russia and China than having a war with them. It's the imperialists that want a war with Russia because Russia is their competitor on the oil and gas markets. But if Russia was doing business with America, while that would not be good for the companies, the big multinationals that want to drive Russia off the map so they can make super profits, the lower level capitalists, they could make a lot of money doing business with Russia. And the same with China, right? These lower level capitalists, they could make a lot of money doing business with China. Same with Cuba, same with Nicaragua. The lower level capitalists have no interest in monopolist imperialism. It is in their interest to attach themselves and do business and be part of the exploding growth that's happening in Eurasia. They would benefit from getting along with Russia and China. Meanwhile, who are their main competitors? It's Amazon and the big multinationals that come into towns and put the small stores out of business, Walmart. And who is the labor movement and the workers? Who are they fighting? They're fighting Starbucks and they're fighting Amazon. And so there is a common interest between the small business owners and the labor movement. And there's a common interest between the small business owners and Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela. And we basically need to figure out how to build the anti-monopoly coalition. There needs to be a combination and an alignment of all the forces in the United States that are opposed to the imperialists. That needs to be the goal. And right now, that is not what's happening. And it's going to be very difficult, and it's not going to happen easily. And, you see Marjorie Taylor Greene, and most of the time when she's talking, I think this woman is so stupid and right-wing, I don't want to hear her, but you hear a moment there where she's saying something like, geez, maybe we ought to have a government that prioritizes the needs of the people rather than wars overseas. And, you see the beginning of these things. You see the beginning of these things. So I'm telling you at this point, we need to be figuring out how to build the anti-monopoly coalition, how to unify against the imperialists. That should be our goal. And what that means, I mean, look, right now we can get our message out there. I'm on YouTube. You know, they haven't banned me from YouTube yet. They've tagged my Twitter as Russian state affiliated media. They banned me from PayPal. They got people making smear hit pieces trying to tell you that I'm Satan incarnate. I'm the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, saying things that if you listen to me for 2 seconds, you know, are not true. You know, they're really going after all of us. They're really viciously going after anyone who is an anti-imperialist right now. But I'm still here. I'm not going away. They can make my life harder, but I am not going away. But that said, we need to be in the process of figuring out how to build the anti-monopoly coalition. And time is kind of running out. Time is kind of running out. I mean, you know, we're in an intense moment. I don't know if things will slow down. Some people think things may slow down soon, but some people say it'll probably be, you know, it'll ebb and flow at least until the midterms. This has political gain for the Democrats, and it's not clear right now. This abortion thing, it may be that things de-escalate in Ukraine and we have the abortion fight. Who knows? But we are in the eye of the storm right now. We don't know when things are going to slow down. But right now, we got to hold the line and we got to hold together. And I will say that, you know, I may not have the biggest audience, but you guys are amazing. You guys are amazing because you have stood by me amid hell and high water. There's a lot of people on YouTube who people watch them and they hate watch them and they're making fun of them. But we have a very, very, very dedicated, solid core of people here who love what this channel is about. They love the unique ideas that are being put forward on this channel. And they really are going to stick by us. And the fact that you've stood with us amid the storm, amid everything coming down on us, the fact that you guys are still here, and as much as there is pressure, you know, anybody, I mean, I won't get into specifics, but a lot of people that I work with immediately suddenly get pressured and canceled and threatened. You know, people who like come on this stream one time, there's like 16 people inboxing them. You're a bad person for talking to Caleb. Don't you know he met with Dugin one time? And don't you know that he's actually a fascist anti-Semite? You know, but a lot of people are just like, screw you. I'm staying here. I'm all in. And that shows that you guys are of a higher caliber, right? Our message here is a little bit complex. It's not a simple message, right? We're not on here, you know, preaching basic ideas. We're preaching some very complicated concepts. This is scientific Marxism. And if you're just looking for a surface level analysis, you're at the wrong place because that's not what we're offering here. Our ideas are rather complex, but it's the complex scientific understanding that has actually changed the world before. It's the complex scientific understanding that made China a superpower, that defeated the Nazis in World War II, that invented space travel. It's important to dig into these ideas, and you will not defeat fascism and the pending global catastrophe with woke feelings. It's going to require scientific thinking, and it's going to require real, serious analysis. And that's what we're offering here on these streams. So I appreciate you all being here. I've got a lot of questions to answer, a lot of super chat questions to answer, but, you know, we're here and we're going to keep going. And we're going to keep fighting for what is true. And we need to start building a ship that can withstand a storm. If you're going to build a ship that's strong enough to withstand a storm, you can't do it while the storm is happening. You have to do it before the storm arrives. And, you know, I've heard many people say before, fear nothing, be down for the whole thing. Fear nothing, be down for the whole thing. That's the attitude that we have to have. Fear nothing, be down for the whole thing, because shit's getting real. I mean, I'm here on YouTube. I'm talking about ideas, but real shit's happening out there. Real shit's happening out there. And there's a lot of people that really, really realize how dangerous the ideas that we put out here are to the status quo, because we actually offer the way out. And you all realize how important what we're doing here is. And the Center for Political Innovation is growing, and new memberships are coming in every day. We're having our national gathering in Kansas, June 22nd through 26th. You'll be getting an invitation to it very soon. Some real shit's happening, folks. And you here are part of it, and you're seeing the beginning of something very, very special. So I just wanted to kind of give my remarks here tonight. I know I say different things on different streams, but I'm trying to get you to understand that. I guess I'll just end with this. We want to thank you. I used to smoke weed every night and felt isolated from my community. Now I haven't smoked since. Oh, I'm really glad to hear that, Christian. I'm really, really glad to hear that. I really, really am glad to hear that. And I guess I just want to end my opening remarks. I want to end my opening remarks by saying this. It's not a cookbook. And that's the important thing. It's not a cookbook. All of human history is the story of people coming together and working for common aims. You are only as strong as the people around you. You are only as strong as the people in your life. And it's really important for those of us who understand this reality, who understand the importance of optimism and struggling to remain optimistic in the face of so much pessimism and destruction. It's really important for us to solidify the bonds between each other, because it's not a cookbook. It's not a snake, right? Human history is the story of people coming together, getting over their differences and working together to accomplish great things. That's the story of human history. And if we take on the antisocial, pessimistic, Nietzschean, irrationalist philosophy of the ruling class, we'll die. We'll die. But if we can come together and continue to carry out our project to save the United States and the world from the nightmare of the imperialists and their high-tech dark ages that I spelled out for you, if we can do that, if we can be a factor, just a factor, we're not going to do it single-handedly, but if our ideas and our work and our educational work is a factor, and a factor in changing the world, if we can bring about and popularize the need for a government of action that fights for working families, we can do that, we'll be doing a good thing. We'll be doing God's work, as they say. Dare to struggle, dare to win, fear nothing, be down for the whole thing, folks. Be down for the whole thing. All right, folks. That's my opening remarks for tonight. Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? I'll call you out as I see you. Names and locations. And then from there, I'll start answering Super Chat questions. So if you have more Super Chat questions you want me to answer, by all means, send them. So we got Jason Smedley Butler. Great individual, Smedley Butler. Tokyo, Japan. Lily in Atlanta, Georgia. Shout out to you, Lily. Great work you've been doing, fighting the good fight on Twitter. Joey in South Jersey. We got Temple City, California. We got Andy from Mexico City. We got Don D in NYC. Great comrade. Jason in Georgia. Dallas, Texas. We got Jamie Nix in St. Paul, Minnesota. Grand Junction. Ji-Ho from Taiwan, China. Don't you forget it. Yeah, Sam in Chicago. Scott and Angie in Miami. We got San Diego County. We got Nassau County, Char Darving. St. David's, Bermuda. We got Bradley in St. Louis. We got Razak in Sacramento. Patrick from Los Angeles. David Rennie from Hamilton, Canada. We got Marissa from Washington State. We got Mart A in NYC. Cheryl in NY. We got Alex in Brazil. We got Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. We got Australia. We got Christian out in Bergen County. Good friend of the show. Great work. Australia. Christine is in Australia. Christine is great. We got Alan in Chicago. Mike in New York, in North Carolina. Chicago. Yada Yisroel. We got Scott in Miami, Florida. We got Charlie in Bethesda. There you go. There you go. All right. Hawaii. Robert from Hawaii is with us. AJ from New Jersey. Pumpkin in Pittsburgh. Baltimore. Alan in Chicago. Good stuff. Good stuff, folks. Micah in Las Vegas. Adam in Salt Lake City. Good stuff. Kevin in Baltimore. We got Kevin in Baltimore. Greenwood Lake, New York. Irish Anger. Juan in Ecuador. David in New Zealand. Bob Troy in New York. Kevin in Baltimore. Good stuff. Good stuff. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Ohio is with us. Shout out to you, Jenny. Very, very good stuff. We got Frank Naha says, great opening. San Miguel from Allende, Mexico. Good stuff. Baltimore, Nidhin from Baltimore. Luke from Madison, Wisconsin. Liverpool, UK. Australia, Austin. Fresno, California. Good stuff. Merseyside, UK. Good stuff, folks. Good stuff. Folks, the more you can post these videos around, the better. We got Austin in Austin, Steve Brisbane in Australia, Ray in Fresno, California. The more you can post these videos around, the more, especially the videos, I've recommended people cut clips of these videos, and people are doing it. And, you know, we have different people who've stepped up to the plate and made YouTube channels, a lot of new YouTube channels. Dylan has one, you know, Historical Progress has one. You know, we've got a number of YouTube channels that are taking good clips from these streams and putting them out there. And I really appreciate that. I think that's really, really great work, because just one channel, you know, if I just cut every little clip, we would never have notifications go out, because, you know, the way the notifications work for streams. So, you know, the more channels this is on there, and the more that you can send these videos and get them out there and post them places. You know, we know it's rigged. You know, if you post one of these videos on Reddit, immediately below it, there's going to be 3 comments, you know, attacking me. And that's not an accident. There's algorithms, there's, you know, there's bots that follow us around. But the more that we can just get these out there, and we get a person here, we get a person there, we get a person here, you know, the more that we can just bring in more people to be part of these live streams, the better off we are, right? The more that we can just, by the 1s and 2s, by the 5s and 10s, bring people into this community. They can learn that this is a source of optimism and scientific analysis. You know, the more that we can go places and just bring people in, right? The more that we can kind of become a subterranean phenomenon, where we're just bringing people in and bringing people in. The more that we can do that, the better, right? And it's going to be like that, right? This is a lot like, it's not a lot like, it's not anywhere near as bad, but it's approaching what the Communist Party went through in the 1950s. You know, it's approaching, you know, what happens during periods of reaction, right? Where, you know, it's not easy to be out there in the front, that we gotta recruit in the 1s and 2s. But the more we can bring people into the community around these streams, the better. And that, you know, by making your own YouTube channel and putting clips up here, maybe you edit them, maybe you just chop them and post them, you know, the better, right? The more that we can get these ideas out there, that's great. I mean, joining the Center for Political Innovation is always a great thing to do. CPI USA, you know, it's our community. And the more you can do that, the better. And we're doing it. And one thing I do want to mention is that coming up before the end of the month, it appears I'm going to the Pacific Northwest. I'm not sure where I'm going. I may be going to Portland. I may be going to Seattle. It's not clear, but I am heading to the Pacific Northwest. So if you're in Washington State, or you're in Oregon, and you're a member of the Center for Political Innovation, or you're part of this community, you know, you may want to hit me up. You may want to get in touch with people locally. I'm not going to be doing a public event out there, because we just don't have the resources and the time to do that in an effective way. But I'm going to be going out there. There's probably going to be like a meetup, like a small meetup before the end of May in the Pacific Northwest. You know, so that's happening. It looks like it's going to be a small meetup. We're not going to announce where it's going to be for obvious reasons. You know, there's obviously a lot of security concerns, but, you know, if you're interested, it looks like, I mean, I don't know the dates yet. I don't even know the dates, but we're working out the details, and I'll be headed to that region for a couple reasons. Some of which are surprise reasons that will be mentioned in accordance with the announcements about the upcoming event. There may be some special guests at the upcoming training school. But in addition to that, I also just want to go out there because there's some really awesome organizers, you know, who joined the Center for Political Innovation, different generations. There's some Gen Z folks that are younger than me. There's some millennials that are my age. There's some Gen Xers that are older than me. There's some boomers even, you know, there's like people from many generations that have come together in that area, in the Portland, Seattle, that area, Oregon, Washington State, that like what we're about. And there's just so many people joining in that area that I feel like I got to get myself out there, you know, and I'm working from home. I'm doing my RT reports every day. And one of these weekends, I'm going to, you know, it's pretty soon. I mean, I'm working out the details. I think I know which weekend it's going to be, but it's not confirmed yet. I'm going to be getting on a plane, you know, and headed to the Pacific Northwest. So hopefully I'll be able to meet with people out there that are part of this community, and you'll be able to see me in person, and see that I'm not a robot, right? I'm not a robot, right? Apparently I'm a Putin robot. Did you know that? Putin programmed me. I'm a robot. And he had Putin and Dugin made me a robot, and they get me on here and I say, I must incite the Americans to oppose freedom and democracy in Ukraine. I'm just kidding. But, and it's funny, someone's going to clip this and say, he admits it. He admits to being Putin's robot. But no, the reality is that, there is a lot going on in the world right now. And, we are basically trying to figure out how to make this community expand, and it's difficult. And so it looks like I'll be in the Pacific Northwest. It'll be discreet. I won't be announcing my location where I'm at, but there may be a discreet meetup. There may be a discreet meetup in the state of Washington or Oregon before the end of the month. Kayla might be going out there. Why am I speaking in a crazy voice like this? I don't know. I'm having a good time. Microphones bring out the best and or worst in me sometimes. But there you go. Trying to speak like a movie trailer. There you go. Anyway, all right, folks. All right, so now I'm going to start answering super chats. So if you have another super chat question, for me, by all means, shoot it my way. And I will answer your super chat questions. So the first super chat question was from Red Illuminati, and he asked me about Tim Pool, an Occupy Wall Street alumni, who is a libertarian who is obsessively anti-China. That's one of the sad things. It seems like that's the difference between the left and the right at this point. The left and the Democrats focus on hating Russia, and the right and the Republicans focus on hating China. And both of them are full of shit. All right? Russia is not our enemy. China's not our enemy. And Russia and China are pretty close allies. So the idea that it's like you're fighting the same thing, essentially. You're fighting, and it may be that the big oil companies, the big four super majors that promote global warming because they get to write the environmental laws, and it'll help them put little oil companies out of business. That they are Democrats, and the industrial manufacturers and people like that are competing with Chinese products. They are the ones that are, that are obsessively opposed to China. Oz just did a raid for you. Infrared Army Rising. What does that mean? He did a raid for me. Did a raid. He did a raid for me. Well, welcome, Haas people. Always glad to have you here. And I should learn the art of doing that. I think I saw that's a thing you can do. But so welcome, Haas folks. Glad to have you here from the Infrared community. Infrared's a great community. Really, really a great community. It seems like there's a, conflicted interests, right? Where it's like the oil companies and the gas companies see Russia as the main threat. Manufacturers see China as the main threat, but they're the same entity, right? Oh, Shama Sawant. They're the same entity at the end of the day. It's just a matter of emphasis. There was a clip I saw once of Tim Pool ranting against China, and he was talking about how the left should hate China because if China takes over the United States, and he's listing all these bad things that are going to happen. Well, the thing is, China doesn't even at this point impose politics on the countries that are already aligned with them, right? China does not export its political model. It doesn't. So the idea that China would come here and things you don't like about China, like the social credit system or whatever, are going to be here, like that's a ridiculous claim because there's many countries like Pakistan, for example. Pakistan is very close with China. China-Pakistan economic corridor. Is China enforcing a social credit system in Pakistan? No. Is China? I mean, it's just a ridiculous claim. And I've watched Tim Pool go on and on about, oh yeah, if China comes, that's just bullshit. It's not. I mean, China does not impose its ideology. China does not impose its system on anybody. So that's pretty ridiculous. And that a lot of the libertarians, it's weird. There's a layer of libertarians who really like China because they like growth and that it's a pretty good place to be a small business owner in China right now. So there's a layer of libertarians who like China because they associate it with growth. However, there are a lot of libertarians that associate China with state power and authoritarianism. And it's part of the whole Republican thing. It's the commies And it's disappointing. And Tim Pool, you know, he was at Occupy Wall Street, but he was always kind of a libertarian, Alex Jones type of guy. And now he's gone full on into that direction. So there you go. All right. Is the main source of distrust the markets? And I would say yes, absolutely. People are struggling with each other. Workers on the job are forced to compete with each other. People backstab each other, especially in more middle class jobs, right? The more middle class office culture jobs are very competitive. And there is just a lot of the culture nowadays gets people to view each other with contempt, brings out the worst in people. And you can talk about that in a lot of ways. And that our culture very much has people competing with each other, distrusting each other, and really viewing humanity in a negative light with contempt. And that is absolutely true. Leveraging people against each other, etc. I think you're absolutely right, Chaya, in your assertion. All right. Ukrainian Nazi refugees in the USA. Biden's already launched the program for the Ukrainian refugees, right? There's already a guest program. And many people that have been waiting for years to get, you know, visas and green cards in the United States are furious about it. But basically, yeah, they're bringing in Ukrainians. A lot of Ukrainians are going to be pouring into the United States. That's pretty clear. A lot of Ukrainians are coming into the United States. There's a guest family program. It's happening. Don't industrialist manufacturers benefit from low wages in China? Not anymore. No, but we'll talk about that. All right. Don't manufacturers benefit from low wages in China? We'll put that on the list. Thank you very much. But yeah, they're bringing them in by the dozens. And again, you know, we're having this woke makeover here in the United States with anti-racism everywhere, and we're importing a bunch of white supremacists. Let's see how good that goes. It's already in Germany. There have been Ukrainians who come in and vandalize Holocaust memorials and vandalize stuff. And, you know, they're already having problems across Europe bringing in these extremist, anti-communist, racist, white supremacist fanatics that are aligned with the United States and Ukraine. So we shall see how this develops. But there's always been a layer of Ukrainian Nazis in the United States. I mean, in Cleveland, for years, I would meet these people, you know, and they people who think Hitler was right in World War II, who think Stalin is pure evil and all that. Those people are already in America. They're in Chicago. They're in Cleveland. There's a big layer of them. Do you know anything about Yusuf Salman Yusuf, founder of the Iraqi Communist Party and martyr? His last words is, "Communism is stronger than death." And death. Yusuf Salman Yusuf. All right. I do know some. I don't know about the individual, but I do know about the Iraqi Communist Party. So we'll talk about that. Iraqi Communist Party martyr. All right. Wrote it on the list. All righty. Ukrainian. Okay. How do we destroy the idea that fascism can only be right wing? What does right wing mean? Because in its essence, fascism is right wing. But what does right wing mean? And what does left wing mean? What do they mean? And this is something that really, really annoys me. Some people are out there and they say, oh, these people want to transcend the notion of left and right. We've already transcended the notion of left and right. The terms left and right come from the French Revolution. After the French Revolution, they formed a national assembly. And the people that were more loyal to the king and more conservative sat on the right. And the people that were more radical and supported the revolution and wanted to march into the future sat on the left. Left means advancing, progressive into the future. Right means sticking to old traditions. That's what they mean. And on here, we are big believers in historical progress. We are big believers in human beings overcoming their problems. We are big believers in advancement and growth, etc. So, you know, we are the definition of left. Meanwhile, the left that claims to be anti-fascist that I pointed out it has this fantasy of a degrowth corporate fascist state that they want to build. They're not left wing. Number one, they don't believe in historical progress and growth. They want to degrow. They want to roll back human history. Number two, they tend to glorify anything that they associate with being primitive, right? They think that industrial civilization is bad. They think that Nicaragua is bad because it wants to build a canal, you know, and counter the Panama Canal instead of just having a big jungle, you know, and that the left they believe that anything they associate with being primitive is good. Anything they associate with modernity or technological progress is bad. That the human population expanding is bad. They tend to glorify Eastern mystical cults, groups like the Falun Gong, groups like the Hare Krishna movement in India. I mean, the synthetic left is, in its essence, it's very right wing. They believe in occultism. They believe in, stopping historical progress. They believe in degrowth. All of these are right wing things, but they are things being promoted by the left, right? The fake left, the synthetic left is pretty fascist, and it's also pretty right wing. The definition of right wing is going backwards. That's exactly what these people are. They want to degrow. That's moving backwards. They want to glorify primitive, civilizations. They want to go backwards. They want to reduce the population. That's going backwards. They want to get rid of technology. That's going backwards. Everything these people are about is going backwards, right? So by definition, they are not left wing. But nowadays, you're right. I mean, when you say fascism can only come from the left, right? The definition of left wing, interesting. Let me just point this out, for example, right? And this is worth pointing out. So, in Europe in the 1930s, the period where fascism was rising, the mainstream position was Christianity. Your typical German, French person, British person, Italian person was some form of Christian. They were a Catholic, they were a Protestant, whatever. That was the mainstream viewpoint. The radical left were atheists because they believed in scientific Marxism, dialectical and historical materialism. And it was the radical right that were occultists, right? One of the main theoreticians of Italian fascism was Julius Evola. And Julius Evola, revolt against the modern world. This guy was a pagan. He believed that Christianity was too modern. He wanted to go backwards. He wanted to go back to the time, before Christianity was dominant. He believed that, man among ruins. And I've read some of Julius Evola's work, and he was not a Christian. He was very much a pre-Christian and advocate of paganism. The Nazis were very much, they argued that, that pre-Roman Germany was the ideal. They saw, they named a lot of their movement after Norse gods, Valhalla, Odin, Wotan, they were all about Wagnerian pre-Christian imagery. So that was what they were about. One of the main fascists in the United States was William Dudley Pelley, and he was an occult novelist, and he was all about mystical stuff and spiritual, and so it's like but in the United States now it's all confused. If you're right wing in the United States, you're a Christian, right? That used to be the centrist position. And now all of this stuff, the occult stuff, right? Mystical stuff, admiration for, admiration for Eastern mysticism and all of that is associated with the left. It's all very, very confused, right? It's all very, very, very confused, right? Very, very confused. So it doesn't make any sense. And so, yes, fascism in its essence is right wing, but a lot of the things that are in our culture that we associate with the left, like degrowth, are very fascist. So, yeah, at the end of the day, fascism is an attempt to stabilize capitalism, and it involves, mobilizing society to roll back living conditions, to reduce the population, and it's stabilizing capitalism with destruction and political repression. That's what fascism is. It's preventing socialism with state repression, degrowth, depopulation, rolling back civilization. That's what fascism is, and it doesn't matter. And that's what Arpalm Dutt, the point that Arpalm Dutt makes in his book, Fascism and Social Revolution, is the ideas don't matter. Fascism is about what you do, not what you say. There was nothing unique about what the Nazis said. People had been saying anti-Semitic shit in Nazi Germany for years. People had been saying German nationalism shit in Germany for years. It was what the Nazis did that made them unique. The same in Italy. It's what the Italian fascists did that made them unique. It's not what they said. Fascism is not about what you say. It's about what you do. It's about what you do. There you go. Hope that clears things up. I am not an advocate of open borders. I support immigrant communities, and I think that anti-immigrant sentiments are just bad. repressive anti-immigrant policies, ICE kicking down doors, immigrant children not knowing if their parents are going to be there when they get home from school. None of that's good, right? And the more terrorized you make immigrants, the more terrorized you make immigrant communities, the less likely they're going to be to call the police. And so those anti-immigrant, those gangs, MS-13, that anti-immigrant folks are very worried about, are going to thrive. The more you repress and terrorize immigrant communities, the stronger the criminal element is going to be in those communities, number one. Number two, one of the main reasons that conservatives say they're against immigrants is they say, oh, they drive wages down. They drive wages down. Well, the thing is, that's illegal. It is illegal to not pay somebody minimum wage. If someone works for you and you have a business, you have to pay a minimum wage. Doesn't matter if they're documented or undocumented. Doesn't matter if they have papers or anything. Minimum wage is required. However, when you terrorize immigrant communities and they're afraid of getting deported, that's how employers get away with paying them low wages. So all the things that conservatives say they want to do, they say, I'm mad these immigrants are coming here because there's gangs. Well, terrorize the immigrant communities, force them into the shadows, gangs get stronger. I'm mad at the immigrant communities and they drive wages down. Well, terrorize the immigrant communities, make them afraid to, demand their employer pay them a decent wage or report their employer when he doesn't give them minimum wage, and they're going to be working for less and less pay. All the stuff the anti-immigrant folks advocate actually makes their complaint about immigrants worse. That's just a reality. Like, it's really stupid. They're like, oh yeah, immigrants coming here and driving wages down, so I want ICE to go break down their doors and terrorize them. Well, then the wages that immigrants make are going to get even lower and lower. In addition to that, these immigrants, they're so bad, they're in gangs, these terrorist gangs. I'll make the immigrants afraid to call the police, make it so they have to get smuggled across the border by a coyote. They talk about it, and that those groups are going to get stronger. So what conservatives say, well, the stuff that conservatives complain about with the crisis of immigration always gets worse in response to what they advocate. Heavy state repression of the immigrant community is going to make things worse, right? So, and you get a talking point, and this is true. There's it's back and forth. So you get people on the right that will say the main advocates of mass migration are the capitalists, right? That's true. But those capitalists don't want the immigrants who come here to be paid decent wages. They want them to be in the shadows. So the capitalists want mass migration on the one hand, and the left gives them that. And the capitalists also want that community that comes here to be so terrorized and so afraid to fight for their rights and so in the shadows that they can get away with exploiting them very, very viciously. So the capitalists, they get it both ways, right? And they've got exactly what they want. They've got an immigrant community that comes here. So they've got, more labor to come in, right? And an underclass. They've got a permanent underclass of people who don't get the same rights as everybody else. But on top of that, they've got instruments of repression. They've got ICE and they've got, customs enforcement and they've got people terrorized, so they get what they want. It's the perfect rig. The anti-immigrant sentiment and the pro, the liberal pro-immigrant sentiment, they both serve the same agenda, right? The crisis of mass migration is rooted in the crisis of capitalism. And this is something the liberals never want to talk about. Liberals, no, they're just happy, The fact there's dead bodies showing up at the border every day, at the border with Mexico, every day they find dead bodies, people that died of, exhaustion trying to get away from those conditions. That's not a good situation. Rafts on the Mediterranean, people drowning. This is not a good situation. There's a global crisis of mass migration, and it's been spawned by capitalism. And it's not the American dream, and it's not a beautiful thing. It is capitalism in crisis. It is a moral crisis. This is going to be remembered like the Holocaust. The bodies that are turning up along the border, the drownings in the Mediterranean, like when they add up the bodies that this is going to be, the bodies from Africa, the bodies from the Middle East, the bodies along the Mexican border of the United States, the bodies trying to flee from Haiti, when they add it up, this is going to be like the Holocaust. People are going to look back and say, holy crap, holy shit, how did they let this happen? And nobody seems to talk about it. And liberals talk about it like it's a good thing. It's not a good thing. It's a humanitarian disaster that people can't live in their own country, and it's caused by capitalism. And U.S. policy is making it happen. And liberals talk about it like it's a great thing, and they're full of shit. And this is one of the main things that statements by me are taken out of context, but even without context, they're pretty reasonable. This is the main thing I'm getting attacked for. One of the main things I'm being attacked for in recent hit pieces is pointing out that liberals are celebrating a problem. Conservatives, on the other hand, all they've got is this kind of, this bigotry. I don't like those people coming here from somewhere else. Why don't I go back where they came from? Oh, we got to have the police kick in their doors and terrorize them. That'll solve the problem. Conservatives don't have an answer. Conservatives don't have an answer. They just dehumanize them. They're the others. They got disease. They're rapists. You've seen all the Trump stuff. That doesn't help, right? And that doesn't, does that help anything to have, to demonize people, to hate them? No, right? The solution to the crisis of mass migration, the solution to it is a mass program of construction. We need to build. And we need the United States and Mexico and Nicaragua to team up and start a program of mass construction. We need to build. We need economic development. We need growth. We need to get rid of neoliberalism. We need to build infrastructure. We need an economic corridor, the Sandino-Zapata economic corridor for the southwest of the United States and Mexico, get China involved, get Nicaragua involved, and have a corridor of development from the United States all the way down to Central America, raise people out of poverty, an emergency program of development. That is how you solve the problem. And no, I'm not for open borders. And open borders, and this is one of the things that annoys me. Socialist countries all have borders, okay? Even if every person who comes is allowed to come in, they're still going to have to go through customs when they come in. You know what I'm saying? Like, so when people go around and say open borders now, I mean, that's not real policy. And if you go to people and say you want open borders, there's right wingers who go around saying you want open borders, but even the Democrats, they don't advocate open borders. They advocate maybe looser immigration policies. They don't advocate open borders, right? Every socialist country has borders, right? And that even if you were allowing every single person who wanted to come in, they would still have to check in. You would still monitor them coming in. You'd still look at their paperwork when they came in, even if you were letting them in. So, that's just, it's not a real policy. And that's why we sound crazy to most people. It's like, you want open borders. Most people are like, what does open borders mean? Anyone can just walk in. We just don't have anyone standing there, and every terrorist and drug gang just walks over the border. We don't take their ID. We don't, there's no customs. There's no nothing. They just walk right in. Is that what we do? There's no fence. There's nothing. Everyone just walks across the border. Most people think that sounds insane. And it is insane. And no country in the world except Israel has that. Israel has no borders. Israel is constantly expanding into Palestinian territory. But other than Israel, where the colonizers are so aggressive that they don't want to actually have a border, other than Israel, there is no country in the world that doesn't have borders. And so when we go around the world telling people that we want no borders, we sound like lunatics, right? Now, under communism, the higher stage of communism, that society of vast material abundance, okay? Vast material abundance where wealth is expanding. And that society, yes, obviously borders will break down. But you can't go around now saying you want a world without borders because it sounds nuts to most people. It's just like abolish the police, right? Again, yes, the police are an institution that serves capitalism. Yes, in the process of moving towards socialism, we're going to have new institutions. But you go around saying we want a world without police, you sound like a nut, right? And the way these wokes operate is they think that sounds radical, right? I don't want any borders. And you're like, okay, so tell me how this works. And they're like, what? You want borders? You're racist. And it's like, no, I'm just telling you, how does this work where there's no, and you're racist. I'm triggered by you existing. Ah, you said you want borders. You're the grand wizard of the, and it's bullshit. Okay. And people are going to grow out of that. All right. And it's the same with the police, right? Again, you go to most people and you say to them, hey, we want no police. And they go, okay, so it's the middle of the night and someone's breaking into my house. Who do I call? And then people say, well, people of color don't call the police anyway because the police make things worse. That's a fair point, but, police do exist and, they are the law that exists and, domestic violence situations, etc. There are situations where it benefits working people for police to exist. As bad as police can be, as much police brutality as there is, as much as they don't prioritize the needs of working people, And if you just say to people, yeah, abolish the police, a lot of working class people that are going to be like, what are you talking about? Right? No, what you mean when you say abolish the police is you mean that eventually we want to move toward, a society where instead of the police, we have a community organization, we have a socialist law enforcement agency that's enforcing the interests of the people, right? We want to move toward a society where we have new institutions, and we eventually want to move toward a society, from each according to their own ability, a society of abundance where they're the state where there's a way. That's what we all want, okay? But if you just go to people and say you want to abolish the police, you sound like a nut, right? And then the way these wokes work is they say, I don't want there to be any police. And so then a working class person says, okay, the drug cartels are coming into my neighborhood and, taking my neighbors hostage. What do I do about it? They're like, you're racist. Oh my God, you're defending the police. And it just sounds nuts, right? And you're not allowed to argue with them. And they've got their big emotions and they just want to have big emotions, right? That's all they want to do. A lot of these wokes, it's just this, they want to have these explosive, angry emotions. And, that's it. And it's just, again, yes, obviously the way the police are acting is completely bad. And, defund the police. A lot of those defund the police policies I agree with. Situations where it's better to have a mental health professional do it than a police officer. It's great, right? Here in New York, I saw that, right? They have, generally if there's a homeless person who's hanging out or, taking a dump on the street or something like that, they'll call the cops. Well, the cops are known to escalate, right? And they'll be violent with the person. So, if you have a mental health professional talk to the person, a mental health professional is a lot less likely to shoot them, right? And defunding the police, having the role of police officers be replaced with people that are social workers and stuff, and that's good. That's great. I agree with that. Police brutality is a horrendous problem. I was protesting police brutality years ago. I actually video recorded an instance of police brutality and got someone acquitted in court because of it. So, I'm all about that. But we need to come up with real policy solutions that people can implement, not just these emotional things that people come up with. And we need to sound like we actually want to run the government. We need to sound like we are going to be the people that are in charge. I mean, look, we need to sound like people could actually see us elected. That's why I'm all about suit socialism and wearing a suit. People need to envision us taking the oath of office. People need to actually be able to see us becoming congressmen and government officials. We need to sound like we could actually run the country, not like we could run the riots that tear the country apart. We need to sound like serious people. And there are serious policy proposals that say, instead of having the police who want to fight and terrorize people, right? Why not replace situations where police go in, domestic disputes, with, mental health workers? I think that's a great idea. That's a real proposal. So there you go. All right. Committee for Workers International, Trotskyist Alliance sponsored a lot of rhetoric on open borders. Why did they go so hard in on it? Because they're trying to recruit wokes. And that's the problem, is you cannot compromise with wokeness. You can't. We're doing something different. We agree with opposition to police brutality. We agree with opposition to racism. But the best cure for racism is the picket line, working people coming together to see they have a common economic interest against the bosses. Imperialism is rooted in the capitalist system, and if you just get into this, everyone feel guilty, woke therapy thing, and if you get into this call out culture where everyone's condemning everybody else, pretty soon everything falls apart. You cannot compromise with this stuff. Wokeness is not a recruiting opportunity for the left. I mean, these people want to murder us, folks. I mean, these people really believe that if you support Russia or China, you're the same as a Nazi and you deserve to die. That is what they believe, right? And they're trying to incite violence against me and my family right now. I mean, look at these people. I mean, they're really, people with hundreds of thousands of videos on their channel are going out of their way to put the label Nazi on my head. I'm married to a person who's not white. I've spent years organizing a police brutality, but they are really trying to put the label on Nazi so that one of their followers who's nuts, and a lot of their followers are pretty nuts, one of their followers will come to my home and stab me to death. Like, these people want to murder us. People on the right are confused and whatever and have backward notions. But, the wokes want to kill us, right? I mean, the wokes are really, really dangerous people. They are really, really dangerous people. And the way that they react to me, when I'm not even saying things that are really opposed to what they're saying. I just told you I oppose raids and terrorization of the immigrant community. I just told you, I agree basically more or less with rolling back the role of police and bringing mental health workers who don't escalate situations. A lot of what woke supposedly believe and I believe in, but they believe I'm Satan. They believe I'm Hitler, and anyone who comes to be part of this community, they start threatening and terrorizing. These people are really dangerous. You cannot compromise with them. Nothing you say to these people will ever be enough, no matter what. You can show them all the great things I've done in terms of anti-racist work. No, it doesn't matter. It's somehow all a big ruse. It's all a big conspiracy to cover up the fact that I'm a Nazi, right? No, I'm serious. That's what they believe, right? Somehow I am a Nazi, even though I'm on here, preaching anti-fascism. I'm a Nazi and I deserve to die. That is what these people believe, and they are broadcasting this out all over the internet, all over the world, going out of their way to harass people who aren't even really a big part of the community I'm part of. Get calls from, get threatened. I mean, these people are really dangerous. They are working for the ruling class, and they are really trying to destroy any dissidents. And it's not just me. They did this to David Rovix, the great folk musician. And they've done this to all kinds of people. They are vicious, 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 evil people. And they are committed to their pessimistic degrowth view. And optimism triggers them, right? If they see optimism, it makes them angry because they're bitter, self-hating, awful people. And they want to kill, right? And they think it's okay. And they think that murdering somebody for their political views is okay. And they think that, people with views different than theirs existing is somehow oppressing them. And they're wealthy. They're from wealthy backgrounds, but it doesn't matter. I mean, these are scary people, right? And you can't compromise with this. If somebody walks into your socialist group and wants to monitor, I think that's a good way of putting it, and that's basically what they are. They are the Azov battalion of the West. That's what they are. Right. And that if somebody comes into your socialist group and starts wanting to monitor everyone's social media and criticizes people for, did you know you tweeted somebody who once talked to somebody who once talked to somebody, you just get them out of there. One of these people comes in and they're like, now, if you hear me clap once, and if you hear me clap twice, and if you hear me clap 3 times, and we don't read books here, we talk about anti-oppression theory, and we're going to make a list of everyone in the group who's made a mistake, and we're going to kick them out because having them, like, if one of these people comes into your group, run. That's my attitude. That's one of the best things about the Center for Political Innovation. There's no wokes. We're definitely concerned about racism. We're definitely never going to let anyone be mean to anyone else or bully anybody or make anyone else feel uncomfortable. But there is no compromise with wokeness. None. We will not compromise with wokeness. And that's why we're growing so rapidly, because people are tired of this stuff. People are tired of it. People are really, really, really tired of it, right? And every communist group in the United States is infected with this crap, right? You don't talk about communism. You talk about, why trans people who pass have privilege over trans people who don't pass. That's what you talk about. Yeah, that's what you talk about now. You don't talk about like Marx and Lenin and ideology and theory. No. We talk about the cis privilege of trans people who pass. Somebody came to me and they said, yeah, Caleb, you don't know the half of it. My communist group had a 3-day debate about whether or not trans people who pass have cis privilege, have cisgender privilege. And it's like, I'm sorry, it's an interesting conversation, right? The trans people who pass, because people don't know they're trans, have cisgender privilege or not. I don't know. Might be an interesting conversation to have over coffee with somebody sometime, but that's not why I became a communist. I did not become a communist to have 3-hour conversations about whether or not trans people who pass have cisgender privilege or not. I'm not interested in talking about that. That's not what this is about. All right. I'm right-wing, and an anarchist was fine with me until I showed my pro-China sentiment. Then they blocked me for being an Nazbol. It seems bull is more offensive than... That's hilarious. You're right-wing, and they were okay with that until you were pro-China. That sounds to me like these people are just pro-imperialist shills. But I have no idea who you are there, Clyde, so there you go. That's what you said. I take your word for it. All right. Fidel Castro said he believed in Jeffersonian democracy, not communism at first. Yep. And Dwight Eisenhower said he was going to be the George Washington of Cuba. And there was a big parade to support him. And he came to the United States and he toured. And, yeah, he was definitely at the beginning. It was not clear that Fidel Castro was going to move Cuba towards socialism at the beginning. And so the USA made overtures to him, right? They opposed him and they backed Batista for most of the war, but towards the end they switched and they did support him towards the end. But then it became clear that he was going to move Cuba in a socialist direction. And it was, I believe, 1961 that he officially announced that Cuba would become a socialist nation. So yeah, I mean, Fidel Castro, the July 26th movement was a coalition. And it was kind of a vague nationalist thing. We're going to build a new Cuba. We're going to build a strong new country. Raul Castro, Fidel's brother, was a member of the Communist Party. Che Guevara had been in the Communist Party of Guatemala, and he had resigned in protest of the way the Communist Party didn't fight hard enough against the coup against Jacobo Arbenz. In Guatemala, you had a Popular Front government where Jacobo Arbenz was elected and the CIA overthrew him in 1953. And Che Guevara was living in Guatemala and he felt the Communist Party sold out and betrayed them. So he ripped up his Communist Party card. He stopped being a member of the party. But Che Guevara and Raul Castro, Raul Castro was a party member, but he broke discipline. He didn't have permission from the Cuban Communist Party to be part of it. And initially, the Cuban Communist Party opposed the uprising where Fidel Castro took power of the July 26 movement. They opposed it because during the Second World War, there had been a fascist government in Cuba that was aligned with the Nazis. And the dictator, what is his name? The dictator of Cuba before the revolution, Batista. The dictator Batista had been aligned with the United States. And so he had come to power and had been like an anti-fascist, right? He was aligned with the United States rather than with Spain and with Franco and with fascism. So the Communist Party had helped bring Batista to power and fought against the pro-fascist guy who was there. And they had like one or two symbolic seats where they got elected and they had some labor unions. And the Communist Party thought that maybe Batista, things weren't so bad. And they didn't want to risk having a full-on revolution. Well, Fidel did risk it. Raul Castro joined the revolution without telling the party. And, Che Guevara was part of it. And then when they came to power, the Communist Party initially, was somewhat opposed to the revolution, but they changed their position. They supported it. And they started participating. And eventually, what is now called the Cuban Communist Party is a merger. It was a merger of three parties that existed before the revolution. The July 26th movement of Fidel Castro, the Democratic Youth, which was a group called Democratic Youth. It was like an activist youth group that had broken with the Communist Party. They were anti-Batista. They were called the Democratic Youth. Then there was the Popular Socialist Party, which was like the Communist Party of Cuba. And so they merged into what is now the Cuban Communist Party. It's not directly the heritage of the Comintern Party that was in Cuba. It's a merger. So there you go. That's how it is in most socialist countries. The Korean Workers' Party, for example. There was the Communist Party of Korea. There was the Social Democratic Party of Korea. There was the Christian Party of Korea. There were a number of anti-fascist or anti-Japanese groups on the Korean Peninsula that merged into what is now the Korean Workers' Party. And that's an important thing to note. In a lot of the socialist countries, the ruling Marxist-Leninist Party is not the Comintern Party. It's a merger. It's a coalition, people, a coalition, just like Lincoln built a coalition. This is how real politics works, folks. Why do I have to explain these things over and over and over again? Makes me mad. I'm just kidding. No, it's all right. I love you guys, but it's just I get frustrated with the silliness, the silly harassment that we endure. But shout out to Haas. I appreciate him sending people on over. All right. But yes. All right. Shama Sawant. I've met her before, interviewed her for RT. When she got elected, I thought that was a good thing that Shama Sawant was elected. And Jason and Ruhe made a video. You can probably still find it. Right after she got elected. The fact that a Trotskyite got elected to city council in Seattle, it's a big deal. And it showed that, things were changing. And she was elected on a platform of basically supporting raising the minimum wage, socialism. So I just want to say as a poor rural Pennsylvania, CPI's goals are something all working people in this country can get behind. Absolutely. Thank you, comrade. I'm glad you feel that way. And I'm really, really glad. And, stay strong. Shout out to you. Shama Sawant, she got elected, and was a good sign that, that people, in a major U.S. city were willing to vote for an open, Trotskyite communist who upheld the Bolshevik Revolution, who believed in, raising the minimum wage. It was a good thing, right? Now, she's not where I'm at politically. She doesn't support China. She's not really supporting Cuba. She's a Trotskyite. I'm not a Trotskyite. I see Trotskyism as counter-revolution in disguise. It's fake communism, but the masses don't know that. They still think she's a communist. They can't tell the difference. We all look the same. By the way, I got to tell you, folks, we all look the same to the masses. If you say communist, the masses can't tell the difference. And that's part of why CPI is not called communist something. We're called the Center for Political Innovation. Because when you say communist to the masses, they can't tell the fucking difference. Revolutionary, Communist Party USA, IWW, Trotskyite, they don't know the difference. We're all the same to them. We're all people that think communism might work when everyone knows communism failed everywhere it's ever been tried. We're all the same, right? I mean, they can't tell the difference, right? So, the fact that they voted for an open communist, right, or at least someone who claims to be a communist, was a good thing. But if you watch Jason and Ruhe's video, I just did this, it was years ago when I was still being friendly with him. I didn't fight with him about it. I figured, okay, this guy does some good work, but it was awful. And he basically said, well, she's a Trotskyist, so she's not a real communist. So, and on top of that, if she was a real communist, she's of Indian heritage, so she would go and be part of the Naxalites in India. And I was just like, come on, Jason, are you serious? In a major U.S. city, the people voted for somebody who considers themselves to be a communist. And you don't think that's a big deal? Oh, she's not the right kind of communist. Oh, she should be waging guerrilla warfare in the countryside. The Naxals have made zero progress, and for 40 years. The real communist movement in India is among the factory workers in the cities, and it's among the farmers and stuff. It's not among the rural people's war, hiding in the jungles of Andhra Pradesh, robbing people. The Naxals have made zero progress, and it's like when Jason said that, I'm like, this guy, and the problem is, and this is the thing, it's divorced from the living struggle. That's why, I do these streams and there's like 300 people watching right now, well over 300 people. More people watch these streams, but I made a point of going out in the streets on Sunday. And a couple people tried to attack us. Shout out, by the way, to Charlotte and Don and Nick of Flame of Liberation. That was really great that we were out there in the streets. And Diane Sayre, who came, the Senate candidate of the Schiller Institute, and I mean, the fact that we went out there was a big deal because it's scary, but that we're touching grass. We're engaging with people on the street, and people are watching us on these streams, but we're seeing people who wouldn't normally see us. And we handed out our statement to people who wouldn't normally see us, and people asked us questions and we answered them. You have to be able to engage with people in the real world. You have to be able to do that. And that, yes, ideally it would be great to be part of a big contradiction, and the huge labor movement or something like that. But in some cases, it's just a matter of going out and talking to people. Communists ought to learn how to knock on people's doors and say, hey, when I go out in New York City, I see people from the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I see people from the Mormons, and I see people from the anti-abortion people. And wouldn't it be great if I was on the subway and somebody said, hey, have you ever heard about socialism and how socialism is the answer? I am waiting for the day. There's a family in Iowa or Kansas or Minneapolis, and they're just living a normal day. They're at their house, and there's a knock on their door, and they open the door and says, hello, I'm from the local communist organization. I want to talk to you about why communism is the answer. That is what we need more than anything right now. That is what we need. We need our ideas, real scientific Marxism, to get out there among the people. That is what we need. We need that. We need it. And you got to be able to talk to people. And like when Jason says crazy things like Kshama Sawant getting elected means nothing, I mean, it's because he doesn't understand. He's not out among the people. It was a great thing. Kshama Sawant, to tell you the truth, she has stayed in office. They've tried to remove her. She stayed in office because she's smart enough to mobilize a movement, right? That's true. She uses her position as a member of the city council to do shit that empowers the left, protests and stuff, And that's why she keeps getting elected. Her being elected is an asset to a lot of people, to, labor union organizers, to community protests. She is using her position to advance the protest movement. Now, the protest movement as it currently exists has a lot of problems, has a huge amount of problems. But that said, That's why she's getting elected, right? She is, and also if AOC were using her position in the same way, AOC and Shama Sawant are not cut from the same cloth. AOC is a plant. Shama Sawant is a movementist, right? She's a trot movementist. Well, I argue that we don't need AOCs. They're just plants. They're just, performers, actors. AOC is not really from the progressive movement. She's from the Kennedy School of International, she's from the power structure. Whereas Shama Sawant is from the movement. She's from what you call the movement, right? She knows all the PSL people in Seattle probably know her. All the people in the Socialist Alternative and the CPUSA, they all probably know her, and she's the movement. And for whatever reason, in Seattle, the movement is strong enough to get somebody into office. Well, that's great, but I say out of the movement to the masses, right? But she's a movement politician. She's like a George Galloway. She's like a, you have those. You used to have a lot more of them, but Charles Barron here in New York City. He's, New York State General Assembly. That guy's a movement guy. He's, former Black Panther. I campaigned for him. He's a great guy. And he's a movement guy. He's an elected revolutionary, he calls himself, right? And you have Black nationalists, you have labor kind of people. Every so often, it's a lot more rare than it used to be. It used to be in a lot of major cities, you had 5 or 6 of these people. There's a woman in Detroit named Joanne Watson, who is associated with the new communist movement and the Maoists of the 70s, and she's pretty revolutionary. And you have people that are elected to office that are movement kind of people, and that's Shama Sawant. She's a step above AOC. AOC is just bullshit. Shama Sawant's a movement person. The movement is not what we need. Out of the movement to the masses. The movement has been hijacked and is not serving the masses right now. But that said, at least people in the movement on some vague way want to be better than what's there. It's better to have Shama Sawant than not have her. I wish she wasn't anti-China. I wish that she was saying more populist economic stuff like we say. I wish that, she wasn't pandering to wokeness. I wish she would fight wokeness. But for whatever reason, she is a movement official. And that's a good thing. And, I would vote for Shama Sawant. I would vote for her. I don't agree with her. And when I interviewed her, it was a friendly interview. I don't think she's a bad person. I think she's a good person. And I think she's just a movementist. I was a movementist for many years. I was in the Workers' World Party, and I was at every protest around every issue. I was at Occupy Wall Street. I was arrested. And Shama Sawant is an Occupy Wall Street person who got elected, who happens to be in a Trotskyite faction. Good for her. It's not what we need. It's not going to bring socialism to the United States. And it's kind of a dead end politically, out of the movement to the masses, but it's not bad, right? It's probably better she's there than not. You know what I'm saying? And that's how we need to understand these things, right? I say out of the movement to the masses. We need to get out of the movement. We need to get to the masses, but a movement person in office is not the devil. And that's the right attitude. And let me add that approach that Jason had that drove me up the wall even back then when I was still trying to be friendly. Oh shit. What the hell is going on here? All right. Even that approach that Jason had, even back then, right? That Jason had, is not the right approach. If our approach, and it's the approach that a lot of woke people have, not just about politics, but about people in general. If the approach is you're always looking for people around you to be wrong, you're always looking for people around you to be wrong, to be flawed, you're always going to be disappointed. Your goal in politics should be to make allies, right? I gave AOC a chance. I really wanted to like AOC. I met her before the campaign. She seemed like a great person before she won the nomination. I met her at a reception. She was friendly. We chatted. I told her I worked for RT. She told me she loves Lee Camp, and she even offered to get a picture. Never. Brian will never accept. All right, we'll write that down. All right. Could Brian Becker accept out of the movement? And I gave AOC a chance. If somebody in the power structure comes along and seems like they might be friendly to anti-imperialism, we ought to give them a chance. We ought to try to make allies. Our goal should not be to make enemies. Our goal should be to make allies. And, Shama Sawant, you know, whatever, you know, I mean, I don't think the movement has potential. I think we need to get out of the movement to the masses, but she is a movement politician. Anyhow, next question. All right. Don't manufacturers benefit from low wages in China? Not really anymore. That, like, maybe in the 80s and 90s, that was the case, but that's not actually true at this point. They do benefit from China's ability to do stuff for them. And that was a very interesting article in Bloomberg News that was published. When Trump was running for office, he said he was going to make Apple make their iPhones in the United States. And there was a great article in Bloomberg that said Apple couldn't make their iPhones in the United States because we don't have enough engineers. We don't have enough scientists. And the amount of people that you need and the amount of people that have to be mobilized in order to build a giant cell phone making factory, it wouldn't be possible in the United States. Meanwhile, in China, the state does it for them. They say, we want to build a factory. We need this many engineers. We need this many technicians. We need this many laborers. And the Chinese Communist Party says, okay, boom. And they do it. And then they make them pay into the state a certain amount of revenue. And it's their state-run economy that enables China to be a great place to do business. It's not the low labor costs as much as it is the ability of the state to mobilize and accommodate production. And that's a great article in Bloomberg News about that. But really, at this point, when you talk about low wage production, you're talking about Bangladesh. You're talking about different places. Low wage production happens in Taiwan, for example. You have low wage production in a lot of different places. But China at this point, capitalists are not going there for low wages. They're just not. There are Chinese companies that can sell you parts, right? That's a thing that happens, right? You can get a book printed in China, right, for way cheaper than it would cost to print it in the United States, because in China, the Chinese company that's propped up by the government, and there's things like that, but it's not like it used to be. It's not like you go and open a factory in China. It's not like that anymore. All righty. The Iraqi Communist Party. Well, I don't know about this individual from the Iraqi Communist Party. I do know that the problem with the Iraqi Communist Party is that, I don't know about this individual, and this individual you mentioned in your super chat may have been a very heroic individual, and I don't want to downplay the heroic sacrifice this person could have made. I just don't know enough about the person. But I do want to tell you that the Iraqi Communist Party supported the U.S. invasion of Iraq, and that in Iraq, the socialist revolution took the leadership of Baathism. And this is a problem that happens. When the Bolsheviks took power in Russia, originally there were three parties. There were the Bolsheviks, there were the Mensheviks, and there were the left Mensheviks that supported the revolution, and there were the left socialist revolutionaries. But anyone who was serious joined the Bolsheviks, right? And in Venezuela now, right, there are a number of parties that are supporting Maduro. There's the Communist Party, the Fatherland for All Party, the Tupac Amaro Party. But if you're really serious in Venezuela, you join the United Socialist Party. And that in Iraq, Saddam Hussein and the Baath socialists took power, right? This is a guy from the 40s. See, I don't even know anything I know nothing about him then, right? My knowledge of Iraqi politics is post-war, so I know nothing about this guy, so forgive me. But I guess the point that I'm making is that, the nature of the socialist revolution in Iraq was a Baathist Arab socialism. And the Communist Party of Iraq kind of turned into a place for naysayers to go. And it kind of turned into this place of, okay, if you think, you're kind of, there's always an element of what you might call the permanent opposition, right? And they always exist. And and that's kind of what the left in the United States is, right? It's just people that are just, whatever's popular, they're against it. It's like if you're ever in a socialist group, it's the one person who votes against whatever it is, and it becomes the permanent opposition, right? And in Iraq, if you were a serious socialist, you joined the Baathist Party. And the Baath Party taught Marxism. The Baath Party, they recognized the Soviet Union. Dinesh D'Souza. All right, we'll talk about that. They recognized the Soviet Union. They were a pretty amazing party in a lot of ways. They did a lot to improve living conditions in Iraq. And so the Communist Party of Iraq became this like Soviet aligned party that had a weird relationship. Now, there was the Iraqi Communist Party that was in exile, and then there was the legal Communist Party of Iraq that had 1 or 2 seats and ran in the elections, right? And the legal recognized Communist Party of Iraq didn't support the invasion, but the Iraqi Communist Party that had supported Qasem before the coup, et cetera, did. So it's just something to watch out for. In Iran, for example, Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, condemned capitalism in all of his speeches. He aligned, with the countries of the Bolivarian world. He spoke highly of Fidel Castro. There's the House of Latin America, which is this institute in Iran that manages their relations with the Bolivarian countries, and the people there understand Marxism. Marxism is a really well understood ideology in Iran. It's not the ruling ideology, but the understanding of imperialism that the Iranian government promotes in their anti-imperialist writing is very much a Marxian one. And it's like, in Iran, there are Marxists in Iran who support the Islamic Republic as an anti-imperialist force and want to push the Islamic Republic to be more socialist. And then there are Marxists from Iran who live in Canada or the United States, and they hate the Iranian government and want the United States to invade and overthrow it. And it's like, if you're a serious Marxist living in Iran, you're going to find a way to be in the more anti-imperialist hardline wing of the movement and push the Islamic anti-imperialist revolution to be more socialistic. And if you're living in exile in the United States and you're kind of aligned with the imperialists because you hate the regime so much, you don't represent them. And that a lot of times that will happen. You will, there are many like ultra left elements in Venezuela, anarchists and Hojists, etc., that don't really support Venezuela, right? And it's, again, how much do they represent on that? But anyway, next question. Could Brian Becker ever accept out of the movement to the masses? No, because his whole thing is Brian Becker's a movement hustler. PSL, the leaders of PSL are very good at setting up the cage for the protest, getting the permit for the protest. They want to be the managers of the movement, the stage managers of the movement, the king of the protest cage. So for Brian Becker to ever admit that we need to get to the average people and not do what he's done his whole life doing, he would never do that. His paycheck, how is he going to raise money doing that? He's figured out his whole life how to raise money from the movement. So how would he raise money from out of the movement? Number one. Number two, you can't teach an old dog. He's going to forget everything he learned. He learned carefully how to outmaneuver everyone else for the permits and all of that. So yeah, that's why we have to, at the end of the day, look, we allow dual membership. You can be in CPI and be in PSL. You can be in CPI and be in, CPUSA. But at the end of the day, none of these groups at the end of the day are going to rejuvenate. And I don't see it happening because they're entrenched in the movement, and we got to get out of the movement to the masses. All right, next question. All right, Dinesh D'Souza movie. I haven't seen that particular movie. Dinesh D'Souza enrages me because, he says so many dumb things that are so easily refuted. I could debate Dinesh D'Souza, and I could destroy him. He says dumb things like, well, the Democrats are racist because they are Marxists. The Democrats during the Jim Crow years, they were the party of slavery in the South. And that shows that Marxism is racist. That's why Hitler adopted it. He says these dumb things, like Karl Marx supported the Republican Party and Abraham Lincoln. So saying that Lincoln was against slavery does not prove that Marxism is racist. That's like, he says so many of these dumb, infuriating things that if you know anything about the history of Marxism, and it's like, he really thinks that the only way to be right wing is to be a Republican in the 80s. And he goes and he says, oh, well, Hitler didn't, believe in free markets. He criticized, criticized market policies. So he must be a socialist. So therefore Hitler was a liberal and Hitler was a communist and a liberal because he didn't believe in free market policies. It's infuriating. It's really, really, really infuriating to watch Dinesh D'Souza. It's like you have to it requires this really historical. It's not really deep. There's no deep understanding of ideas and what people believe. It's all just this very, very childish. Yeah, but no, you are. No, you are. It's everything evil is Democrat, right? Everything in evil is Democrat. Everything in evil is Democrat, and everything good is Republican. And it's like the world is so much more complicated than Republicans and Democrats. It's really, really, really annoying. And Like, it's a lot like BreadTube, honestly. These BreadTube people can't understand me saying things. You know, I mean, they read my writings and they find one thing I say, aha, he must be a Republican. No, the world is much more complicated than Democrat and Republican. There's whole ideas and worldviews and ideologies, and it's infuriating. All right, folks. But anyway, it's late. It's almost 2 a.m. and we've had a great stream tonight. So stay strong, folks. I'll hopefully be back tomorrow. If I'm not back tomorrow, I'll be back soon. There you go. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Fear nothing, be down for the whole thing. Fear nothing, be down for the whole thing. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Good night.